Ladies and gentlemen, Deadpool has arrived in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and back on movie screens. With him this time, of course, is X-Men franchise staple Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, a crossover that has been teased and built up to over both previous Deadpool films. And with the Merc with the Mouse glorious return to cinemas, I thought it was high time to revisit a comic book movie classic, the original Deadpool film. Greetings, Designing Hollywood movie fans and beyond. I am your host, Oliver Ricketts. Deadpool was a movie that took a comic book character that typically only existed on the niche outskirts of pop culture, only to very dedicated comic book fans, and made him a household name. A household name superhero that some would argue is on the level of Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman. And while I wouldn't go that far, I'd certainly say he's comparable in popularity to at least any of the original 6 Avengers. And so it's funny with the cultural significance of this movie to think that it almost didn't happen. For me, I was a Deadpool fan far before his cinematic debut in X-Men Origins Wolverine. I loved his evolution in the comics, his rivalry with Wolverine, his weird friendship with Spider-Man, his at the time unique fourth wall breaking shtick. I always viewed him as one of the coolest and most unique parts of the Marvel Universe. But in 2008, when Fox fumbled the character's first appearance on screen by sewing his mouth shut in X-Men Origins Wolverine, I thought to myself, maybe this character is just meant for the comic book pages. Maybe he's never going to get his big screen due, and maybe that's okay. Because at the time, it was logical to think that Deadpool was just a little bit too weird for mainstream audiences at the movies. Of course, the big screen comic book movie summer blockbuster had pretty much been relegated to PG-13. Sure, you had the odd Ben Affleck's Daredevil movie, which of course was a financial and critical disaster, or Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy duology, which, while being well-reviewed and albeit cult classic films, did not exactly make the proper returns at the box office. In fact, the only R-rated superhero franchise that I can think of before Deadpool that was both financially and critically successful would be Blade. Not to mention, when you take the R rating out of the equation, Deadpool is still just too weird for audiences in 2008. How could you have a character that spoke directly to the screen, who everything was a joke to, and who was a parody of several mainline characters at the time, when superhero movies were only just starting to show us superheroes that looked the way they looked on the comic book pages?
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
And it was an absolute certainty that for Deadpool to work, he would need to be what he was on the page, and he would need to be rated R. And so, despite Ryan Reynolds portraying the absolute perfect Wade Wilson at the beginnings of the Wolverine film, and the fans certainly wanting to see that in the full package, at the time it seemed that that subpar version was the only version of the character that any major studio, especially Fox, was going to be willing to give us. And if that was all we were going to get, we may as well not have Deadpool. Until the footage dropped. One year, right around Comic-Con, somebody, a leaker, an unknown leaker, published test footage that would eventually become the opening scene of Deadpool. This footage was violent, full of swearing, and it featured Ryan Reynolds in a comic-accurate on-screen Deadpool costume. And fans went crazy. Although they weren't supposed to see it, now they were demanding that 20th Century Fox make this 2-minute video a full feature-length film reality. Finally, there was conclusive proof that fans wanted, no, craved this movie. And not only did they want it, they were well willing to pay the cost of a general admission movie ticket to see the film. And against all odds, a classic was born. In Deadpool, Wade Wilson, a wisecracking mercenary, undergoes an experimental procedure to cure his cancer, but emerges with accelerated healing powers and adopts the alter ego Deadpool. He sets out on a quest for revenge against the man who nearly destroyed his life. And when I say classic, I do mean classic. This is a comic book movie that won over the hearts and minds of not only hardcore genre fans, but casual moviegoers as well. Despite the over-the-top and sometimes hardcore nature of the subject matter and the R rating, this film somehow held 4-quadrant appeal. And I mean that sincerely. And it's easy to forget that this movie is overflowing with passion, despite humor coming first and the character himself being somewhat juvenile. There is a genuine love for this character amongst this entire crew, and it shines through every frame of the film. And as such, it does justice to the comic book material just as much as any other classic from this era, including, dare I say, The Dark Knight or my beloved Spider-Man 2. You could just tell that Ryan Reynolds loves Deadpool, and he's studied all of the material available to him. Some would even suggest that he's become too much like this character, because this portrayal was such a success that you can no longer see the actor without Wade Wilson. When I see Ryan Reynolds pop up in another film, I'm always thinking Deadpool, whether that be Free Guy, Red Notice, or a Mint Mobile commercial.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Big Wireless has once again raised their prices.
But can you blame me? This Deadpool has so much charm, and he's only lifted by his supporting cast. From the delightful Negasonic Teenage Warhead,
What the?
To the best on-screen Colossus we've ever gotten.
The assailant appears to be armed, dangerous, and wearing a red suit.
Deadpool.
All the way down to Vanessa, who of course is the heart and soul of this movie.
Jinx?
Another element, of course, that makes me very nostalgic and was key to the success of this movie is the brilliance of its marketing campaign. One of the best marketing campaigns in the history of cinema. And of course, we have Ryan Reynolds' brilliant mind for commercial advertising to thank for that. He's a genius with everything he does in that realm, and the way that he treats Deadpool is no exception. He's even used it to brilliantly market other projects afterwards.
So, this week, I'll be reacting to a trailer for a movie which I honestly thought came out like a year ago. Free Guy.
But I would argue that as iconic as this movie is, some of the commercials, trailers, and online promos are equally as iconic images of Deadpool, including this one of him in the Burt Reynolds pose, or this one of him as Bob Ross, or this one of him riding this unicorn for Once Upon a Deadpool. These are key pieces of this franchise. But no Deadpool advertising could compare to the Ryan Seacrest April Fool's Day joke, which was used to reveal that this movie would in fact be rated R. Folks, I want you to take a look at this ad and consider the context for a time when we only got PG-13 superhero films.
Bottom line, Ryan, there may be a billion reasons to make a family-friendly movie, as in sequels and toys, and listen, Ryan, if you...
April Fools.
Deadpool will, of course, be rated R.
This was some of the first initial indication that this movie's heart was in the right place, that it knew what the fans wanted, an irreverent, fourth-wall-breaking Deadpool who was just so over the top. And the entire marketing campaign was so consistent with this that the fans were enjoying it almost as much as they were going to enjoy the movie. And so by the time that you walked into the first Deadpool movie, you felt like you already knew this character, even if you had never touched a Deadpool comic book. And that's just very cool. Another spectacular area where this film excels is budget. It has none. But you wouldn't know to look at it, because while a studio okayed a Deadpool movie to be made, they were not exactly taking the filmmakers to the bank. This was made for a fraction of the budget of a standard comic book movie coming out at the same time, because Deadpool was made for just $58 million. So compare that to the $250 million budgets of Captain America Civil War and Batman vs. Superman, both of which came out in the same year. And then it almost feels like they did more with this movie. Not only is this a science fiction comic book film, but it's also technical filmmaking at its finest, finding ways to mask your limitations so that the audience never catches on. And if you stack this up with other superhero movies, you'd have a hard time making the distinction that Deadpool cost almost less than half, because the entire film is just so well put together. And so with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, it is funny to think that budgetary restrictions were a huge part of this franchise's DNA at one point, because the new film is rumored to have a $300 million price tag. And while I'm excited, I do think that that will bring a little bit of a different feel. Folks, all in all, Deadpool is a staple of comic book cinema and a miracle of filmmaking. And if you appreciate filmmaking, you'll definitely want to check out the rest of our content here on Designing Hollywood. Make sure to like and subscribe because we are always talking about different films of different genres and different eras, breaking them down and telling you why we love them. You'll also want to check out the Designing Hollywood podcast, where we sit down with industry professionals like costume designers and cinematographers behind the films that you love. The links to all of that is in the description below. I also want to send a big thank you to our sponsor, Gardena Cinema, which is a family-owned movie theater in Southern California. They show films of all different types all throughout the year, and if you are a movie lover, you'll definitely want to attend one of their screenings, as it makes for an excellent night out. A link to their social media and their film schedule will also be found in the description below. For Designing Hollywood, I'm Oliver Ricketts, and until next time, get out there and go see a movie.